Hello friends, so today's video is going to be a list of some adult fantasy books that have soft magic systems. Recently, I did a video where I asked all of you to let me know some things that you absolutely can't stand in fantasy that most people really love, and I was kind of surprised to see that both hard, complex magic systems popped up and soft magic systems. The next two go hand in hand, and it was funny seeing both of these things mentioned. One of them was complicated magic systems, and then the other one was soft magic system. And so I thought it'd be fun for those of you who do actually really like them. I thought it'd be fun to give you some recommendations of some adult fantasy, and then also I'm going to do a part 2 to this where I talk about hard magic systems in adult fantasy works. Also, I understand that a lot of times when people are looking to read soft versus hard magic systems, a lot of times it can be because you're an aspiring writer and you're trying to look for examples. But I wanted to say that if you really want to learn more about soft and hard magic systems, I would definitely check out Brandon Sanderson. Not just because of his books, but because if you look up those terms, the first thing that pops up is that Sanderson is sort of known for having created these terms and elaborating on these terms. And if you really want to get all the details possible about these different things, check out his lectures. They're online for free. Obviously, he's the source of all that information. But I wanted to give some recommendations of some books, some of which I just think that a lot of times when we think soft magic systems, we don't necessarily think epic adult fantasy, when in actuality, that's kind of not true. Some of my favorite adult fantasy books end up having rather soft magic systems. First on the list, we have the Witcher series by Andrzej Sapkowski. A lot of times this series, I think people have this idea that the magic system is harder because one, a lot of us came into Witcher through the very popular video game, The Wild Hunt. And when we think hard magic systems, a lot of us automatically start thinking video game tutorial. You think of if you press this button, you can do this thing. And obviously in a video game, that is true. You can do certain things with certain buttons. And so I think inherently it's sort of in our minds that this is a hard magic system. And on top of that, the Netflix adaptation has elaborated on the magic and definitely has added more rules and limitations through a sort of invented backstory for Yennefer. They've elaborated a lot on that character's background. They have a whole magic school, which technically in the actual book series, there is a place that people go to learn sorcery, but it's not set in stone for the reader. And one of the key factors for soft magic systems, not always, but sometimes, is if the magic is working against the characters. And in the case of Witcher, it 100% plays a role. We have a character who becomes very significant in society, and there's so many politics surrounding this character and how influential this character can be because of some possible magic powers that they have. And we follow a man who is a monster hunter named Geralt. I think most of you already know what Witcher is about, but this particular man ends up having a bond with the person that a lot of other people want to use for political gain. So, as a result, you get to see these characters not only interact with each other, but then they're trying to figure out how this magic is affecting them, how it affects this other person. And you really don't get all the answers. Andrzej Sapkowski is a little bit vague when it comes to his magic, and every now and then he'll have some details about how it works, but like I said, I would say the magic is much more hard magic or complex magic in its video game and its adaptation on Netflix, but in the actual book series, it's really not that. And I want to add that the rules and limitations within the magic system are really not all that clear, so that plays a role also. There are ways to go about doing soft magic where it doesn't solve all of the problems as those problems arise. So soft magic systems, a lot of times you'll find them in fairy tale-like stories, and you'll find them in fae type of stories. You find them maybe in folklore and myth and legend. Next up, we have spinning silver. I actually originally was going to do a whole video dedicated to aspects of both soft and complex magic systems that end up working for me and why I think certain subgenres within fantasy tend to lend themselves better to complex versus soft magic systems. And this whole video could have just been fairy tale retellings because a lot of times I find that fairy tales are more so going to fit within the soft magic system, and that's exactly what Spinning Silver is. It's a fairy tale retelling, and we also are following a setting that is very much influenced by actual history. Our main character is a girl who is Jewish, and her father is a moneylender, and he's incredibly kind, but he's also very terrible at his job because he never wants to have to collect his payments back. And there's also a lot of conversations about the fact that because they are Jewish, a lot of people already have negative views. And so this man doesn't want to put his family in danger by demanding what is rightfully theirs. But as a result, they are starting to become very poor. And the daughter, our main character, Miriam, decides, I've had enough. My mother is getting sick. My father isn't able to provide for us. I'm going to collect our debts. And that's what she goes to do. And in building interest and turning silver into gold, she has attracted the attention of the Fae. And the Fae then are starting to get involved in her life in ways that, once again, it's sort of like the magic working against them, or at the very least, the magic's not within their control. They don't know anything about it. And Fae stories or fairy tale retellings, all those kinds of things, like I said, fit so well into the soft magic. But what you don't want in soft magic is for things to just work out because reasons. Suddenly a character is just miraculously healed. Suddenly somebody was dead, but now they're resurrected. You don't really see that in this story. I think something that's great about soft magic systems is they create that magical feel. They create that fantasy setting that just fills you with wonder. And I think that this especially captures that because of its historical setting as well. You feel like you're transported to a time where you understand why you have these fairy tales, why you have certain folklore, why you have people believing in fae, the way it's tied to the weather. You feel like you're there and you almost feel like it's real. And so I think Spinning Silver is a great example of adult fantasy with a soft magic system. After that, we have one of my favorite books that's come out thus far this year, and that would be Justice of Kings. I've talked quite highly of this one. I really enjoyed it. We follow a character named Helena, who is the protege to a man named Sir Conrad von Vault, and he is judge, jury, detective, and executioner all in one. And in order to have this much power, he also literally has magical powers that he can use. However, I couldn't tell you what it entails. He has something that he uses with his voice that sort of forces people to reveal the truth. And I don't know where he gets that power from, but it's established at the beginning that he has this power. But I just don't know, how did he get this power? And sometimes it can, if he uses it too much on someone, they can get hurt or they can die, kind of. So you're like, okay, I know there's limitations to how much a person can handle, but I still don't really understand it, but I'm fine with it. I don't feel like I need to understand it because I also feel like there's not much more to it. It's just like, he can do this. And then on top of that, there's another character who it would seem they can sort of put their mind in animals. And then there's all sorts of other magic that's hinted at and talked about. And it actually reminds me in some ways of the magic in Witcher in that it comes up and you're like, okay, I guess that's how that is. But it's not a system. It's not like characters are pulling from different sources to get different powers. It's not like there's some kind of material that certain people have a connection with. It's nothing like that. It's just this guy has powers, and sometimes other people do too. But it's a great book, and there's so much to this story that has nothing to do with magic. It's so much about philosophical musings and debating law and debating what is just, what is right. And so I don't think that the magic it would be unnecessary. If you had it, it would be cool if you had a harder magic system, but it's not really required for this. It's not like it's the thing that the plot is focused around. Next up, we have the Queens of Innisleer. This is a King Lear retelling, and I always, those of you that have seen me talk about this, you already know what I'm gonna say. I always have to give almost like a little asterisk when I recommend this book to say, it's a little boring, but it's so good. It's very slow. It moves so slow, and there's so much nuance to the characters and their relationship with their father. Obviously, you would expect, because it's a King Lear retelling, that it's very complex. And there's one sister who sees that her father isn't doing well, and she's trying to do what she can to help him, but the other two sisters are very callous toward him because they believe that he had something to do with their mother's death. And you have these really interesting family dynamics, sometimes really tragic family dynamics, and individual tragedies for each of the individual characters. But the magic in this, couldn't tell you. I couldn't give you any kind of ins and outs about the magic. It feels very nature-based. It feels like it's based in the stars. And it's the kind of magic that feels kind of folklore. It was, I would say, more like maybe Spinning Silver's magic than Justice of Kings or Witcher. It also feels like it has something to do with prophecy, which I think fits, once again, this sort of historical feel that its setting has. And the descriptions of The magic, I think, fit very well with the writing style because the writing is very beautiful, very kind of literary and lyrical in this story. And so you kind of get swept away, but it almost has a hint of magical realism because it's not set in stone. And also because there are times that people are insisting that they have magic, but you don't actually know if they do. You don't know if things are going to work. You don't know if this is some old folk tale. This is some kind of random, these are what these people believe, and so we're going to try it, but you don't know if the results are actually going to prove true, if it's sort of like a wives' tale. So it creates this sense of wonder, and at times it seems like it's working, other times it seems like it's not. And I can just feel, those of you that hate soft magic systems, you're probably like, that sounds terrible. But because so much of the story is about the family dynamics, I would say it doesn't impact the plot the way, you know, a wizard suddenly being able to transport everybody to safety in the middle of a really high-stakes battle that just ruins all the tension. It's not going to have any moments like that because that's really not how the magic interacts with our story and our characters. Last for today, we have Engines of Empire. Just like Justice of Kings, this is a new release from this year that I have talked about a lot and I have sung its praises. It was my favorite fiction that I read in the first quarter of 2022, and we follow the Hawkspur Guild, and more specifically the Hawkspur family, which is made up of the matriarch, the mother, and her 3 adult children, one of which does have magic. And then there is another character that is very tech savvy, and there are technological advancements that are being made in place of a reliance on magic. And you actually see this particular city that's embracing these technological advancements, but also the magic has a connection to old religion. And there's a lot of subtle bits of commentary about a society as it's moving into more advanced standards that then it feels like it doesn't rely on religion, and you start to see people losing their faith, but that ends up clashing with people who feel it's important to maintain faith, and then therefore there are some people that almost reject the advancements in technology, and there's just so much of this book that I've loved. However, even though it would seem like you would get a harder magic system, the rules and limitations thus far are not particularly clear. Maybe things will be elaborated on in future books, but I would say the magic in this feels like, for all of you who have watched Game of Thrones, there are things that will happen that you're like, oh shoot, what the heck is going on? And you don't really know what's going on, but you're like, what? And then you don't really care that it wasn't talked about before, or you don't really care that you didn't get any kind of setup that this was possible. And that's usually because when those things happen, it's from outsiders. It's somebody who's living in another land, or it's somebody this mysterious figure that appears. And that's definitely the case with Engines of Empire. So I would say it's more that the magic, there's so many unknowns, and there's so much more exploration to do with the magic that this particular city, they don't really have incentive to explore those things because they're starting to center, especially because you follow a family who is profiting from technology, it makes sense that they wouldn't explore the magical elements. However, you do start to see our characters go to other places, and you see magic that they didn't know was ever possible. So I would say it fits the soft magic category very well, while not feeling like anything was unearned, even though it's not necessarily anticipated. That's it for some adult fantasy recommendations with soft magic systems. I would be happy to do a part 2 to this, or continue to do this style of video whenever I come across soft magic I think is done really well. If you have your own recommendations, feel free to leave them. I tried to find books that all used soft magic in different ways, but feel free to just recommend any book that you think uses soft magic really well, that you think is fantastic. And then, like I said, I'll be doing another part to this where I discuss some recommendations for hard magic systems. Feel free to leave your recommendations for those as well. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. If you're interested in any of these books, I'll have purchase links in the description bar down below. Hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you all later. Bye.